Thank you very much for joining me in this presentation. So today I'm going to talk about environmentally induced migration in the coastal region of Bangladesh, and looking at existing migration pattern and post-COVID implications on livelihood and food security. So as it's a whole picture of Bangladesh. As you are aware, Bangladesh is one of the most vulnerable countries to climate change due to its geographical location, extreme poverty, various effects related to public health, high economic dependency on climate-sensitive sector like agriculture and food. At the same time, it is also prone to natural disaster. So if we look at the overall country picture, it's like if we divide into 4 regions, so all 4 regions are like highly vulnerable to natural disasters. So that includes flood and drought, early monsoon, flash flood, and heavy rainfall, salinity intrusion, sea level rise, cyclone, tidal surge, sea erosions. So, sorry, I think, yeah. So Bangladesh is also like, because of the high population growth and density, it's also, and lack of adequate infrastructure measures, Bangladesh, that makes the climate change more susceptible and vulnerable local peoples. So if you're looking at the study context, it's definitely vulnerable to climate change. And then because this study is mainly focused on southwestern coastal regions of Bangladesh, so there has been significant land use changes in 1980s that led to traditional agricultural transformation by shrimp farming, and that leads to ecological disaster. So such larger scale land use change from rice production to shrimp farming cause larger scale displacement and migration. While we're looking on the existing research, they mostly focus on climate-induced displacement and mostly focus on migration to capital of Bangladesh, that's Dhaka. So therefore, this study I have taken to understand like what are different internal and external factors, especially economic, what are the current adaptation practice on site, resiliency studies, current livelihood, and as well as climate change. And recently, to supplement this study, I have conducted a survey in the coastal region, Bangladesh, to identify as well the post-COVID or similar like pandemic effect, how it affects the migration patterns. So here are my research question. Actually, first part of this research was taken as part of my master's research on environmental migration. And then to supplement, because in my existing research, I have identified the analyzed the drivers of migration. And then I wanted to examine that how the COVID-19 has influenced this migration patterns. So, and which strategy and concept could improve resilience. Okay, so this is the framework of my study. So it's the migration is largely because of the traditional rural to urban migration and gradual environmental change that involves the push factors, pull factors, and gradual environmental change. So, and that leads to environmental impact in this region that causes environmental degradation, causing social conflicts, disruption, loss of livelihood, income and properties, inadequate job opportunities, land use, and cultural shifts. So that's also highly linked to the resilience of the local system and adaptive capacity of the local people. So when adaptation works, because due to the land use changes, a lot of people lose their self-sustaining base of agriculture and their livelihood opportunities. Therefore, people engage in different job opportunity scope, like other than agricultural and rice production. So that includes the diversify their livelihood options. They involve in other informal sectors. Some of them they involve in multiple income sources or multiple jobs. But when existing resilience fails and collapse, then people are leading to going more about permanent or seasonal migration. So seasonal is like this study mostly we focus on seasonal migration that takes about like sometime it length is like 1 week to maximum 28 weeks. So where they're moving, mostly they're moving to urban city centers and including the regional areas. So where they're staying in slums and low-cost housing, that is still there is a lot of issue with social networks in both in destination but at the same time they consider migration as a adaptation strategy so that they can go earn some money and then help support their family. So most of the cases, yeah. So that's my study area. So the study was conducted in 2 regional coastal sub-districts, namely Koira. So one is located here. It's very close to the mangrove Sundarban forest and the sea. And another is Paigasa, another sub-districts in the southwestern coastal Bangladesh. The reason for selecting this study location are the intensity of high disaster risk in this area and large scale agricultural transformation has been taking place in this area, as well as due to close proximity to sea, they're highly vulnerable climate change, and seasonal migration is a common livelihood adaptation strategy in this region. So for this research, mostly is observation and conducted field research that includes personal in-depth interviews and focus group discussion. So for this latest one, last year we have conducted in June 7 qualitative interviews, very in-depth, so that we conducted very much focus on discuss on the what's the scenario. And so selection criteria we have included are like the seasonal migration, who is ready to migrate, or they return to home for short-term period, or immediate family members of seasonal migrants, and within different age group and occupational group that involves like with older people who has like a clear picture of last 30-40 years change in the local environment. So following the research, we have done qualitative content analysis to summarize the study results. So looking at the key findings, so this region previously before 1980 is highly dependent on agriculture, and rice production was the common practice in this region. But in 1980, commercial shrimp farming introduced in this region as a pilot basis, and due to high income from the export of shrimp and demand from like mostly North America and European countries, so slowly like whole regions agricultural land has been converted to the shrimp farming. As you can see in the right picture, is this previously all these lands are like agricultural farms, and then they changed completely to the small shrimp farms. So initially it was a very profitable due to people try to use combined farming. They use both shrimp and then as well the rice cultivation. But for the shrimp production, they need to include saline water from the river. Yeah. So therefore, slowly the shipping of saline through the land completely devastated, destroy the land's organic matters, and as well as capacity to grow rice production, do rice. So therefore, most of the places currently there is still full of shrimp farm, but almost zero or no rice production in this region. So this such change significantly heavily affect, because shrimp farming is not a labor-intensive practice, and that involves very few labors to do for the work. So therefore, larger scale, landless marginal farmer who previously worked as a shared cropper. So landless marginal farmer, like those who have no land for their rice cultivation, they have only land for their home. So previously they used to take the lease of land from the landowner and work as a shared cropper. So after the introduction of shrimp farming, slowly this group has lost their income, and they're forced to migrate. So that is also involved occupational loss, income description, as well as social conflicts in the region, because some people still willing to do agricultural production, but then this shrimp farm owner are very influential and powerful. So therefore, that caused a lot of displacement and food insecurity, as well as drinking water and grazing, lack of grazing spaces, places, and livestock. So looking at the change mechanism, this occupational change mechanism in coastal region of Bangladesh happened in 3 stages. So that includes on rice production hampered with climate change uncertainty and salinity water intrusion, and leads to landscape land use changes, leads to occupational vulnerability because affecting the existing resilient system and causing environmental degradation. So that leads to actually occupational change, because this source of occupational change involves because of family demand. So they're involved in other informal occupation within area. Like they're working as for example, day laborer. They're working as rickshaw pulling is like local transport people use in this area, going for fishing, but those occupations are not adequate to feed their family and sustaining their livelihood. So that leads to involve into secondary occupation. So secondary occupations or diversification of livelihoods option. So since the introduction of shrimp farming in 90s, a lot of NGOs are working on diversifying the existing livelihood options, but then such livelihood options happen in very small scale, and only limited people get benefited through NGO support. And this is because also there's a lack of inadequate capital, lack of skill and education to work in these sectors. And while some of them are engaged in secondary occupation, but there's a risk of disaster, because sometimes they're doing, for example, calf fattening in their pond, but because of river erosion or cyclones, these are all gone. Some people, sometimes they used to go to in the Sundarbans for collecting wood and resources from the forest and honey, but there is a risk of pirates and kidnapping in this area. So therefore, people tend to migrate rather than involve in the secondary occupation, because it's sometimes it's easy to get jobs in the city areas. So that actually leads to transformation. So whether people are going to migrate or not, that there's a couple of factor hampering aspects and facilitating aspects as well. So So one of the hampering aspects is uncertainties in the at destination. So people sometimes they don't know like how they can survive in the new areas. So they try to stay. Possible cultural conflicts with local people, that's very common because when they're migrating to new areas, there is an issue with finding a destination, like finding housing, high transaction costs always involved, like to move there from the village. And some often like there are only temporary or short-term work available, like because these people have lack of skills and education because they only know rice production, and then either they're involved in short-term day labor job or similar type of job that's happening in the upper region of Bangladesh. Like still upper region of Bangladesh is a lot of agricultural production is happening in the middle areas as well. So this lack of cultural and tradition and strong social networks origin. Like people they have a very good tie in the region, in the local areas. They're not willing to migrate, but then the facilitating aspects are like when they migrate, there's a flow of money and rice. Especially people are, because there's no agricultural production in local areas, they are more willingly to go in the region where there is agricultural production, and so that they work in the agricultural field and bring the rice as a salary, and so that they can they don't need to think about their family in the origin, so that they have at least the food. They can support better their household resilience. Some of them, they're involved in like high long-term and work, so that improve their socio-economic status. They buy more land. Sometimes they build their own house. They provide education for their children, and they can also save for future and the property. So looking at the existing, this is like pre-COVID scenario mostly. So as you can see, the destination are mostly regional places, cities and hilly regions, and there is some migration, including in India as well, because Bangladesh is technically surrounded by India, so for some, they're easy for them to go and work there as well. But housing options, they're mostly, if they're going to city, then they stay in a slum environment, very poor and unhygienic living condition there, and either or by employer organize their accommodation. So what are the major fields of occupation at destination? That's the most preferable one is like rice sowing and like harvesting. And those are traveling, migrating to small regional or urban centers. They engage in as work as a van puller or rickshaw driver. So that's for the transport purpose. Brick field and garments industry. So garments industries, because Bangladesh is one of the large exporter of ready-made garments. So people migrating to garments industry mostly migrate permanently. Actually, because they need to work continuously. This is one of the sector is still in attracting permanent migration. They work in wood processing industries or infrastructure maintenance, and as well as shipbreaking industries in southeastern coastal Bangladesh. So the study findings shows like permanent migration from the coastal region is still very negligible. Yeah. So looking at the like migration mapping, so I have make a migration route map for seasonal migrants from the coastal region of Bangladesh. So that involves their move still like Khulna is this sub-district under Khulna division. So a lot of people, they migrate to Khulna for very short-term work. Like for example, they just think, oh, they have no work at the origin in the local area for 2 weeks. So they just go there and work for 1 week or 2 weeks and come back. But a lot of people, as I said, they're lot of interested, but those are going to Dhaka, they stay a bit longer because Dhaka is the capital of Bangladesh and it's very far from the study area, so they stay a bit longer. But some people are still going to like northeastern region of Bangladesh, that's like Sylhet areas, Sylhet in this area. So the reason is that this region still have a lot of agricultural production and people tend to work in the agricultural field, the preferred one. So they're mostly going for all this, but brickfield is one of the like also highly attractive sectors that people go there for like 20 to 24 weeks, as well. In the Chittagong area, we have a big shipyard industry. Also, this is very hazardous, but people is still moving there for permanent work. But also moving to surrounding regional areas, which takes less than a week or 1 week. So people are still migrating in those regions because this region is highly vulnerable to saline. But if we're looking at the middle region here, like this area, so this area is not yet, it's still there is a lot of rice production and no agriculture, no saline farming is happening here at this moment. Even though happening, it's very small scale. So people is going there also for the rice, helping as a day labor in rice field. So looking at the post-COVID implication, so following the identification of first COVID cases in March 2020, government of Bangladesh extended the lockdown, and that's extended until May 13, 2020. So due to lockdown on restriction, because people who migrated and stay in these areas, especially mostly in the regional, like urban centers, they had to come back because in the lockdown, because they involved in temporary work, there is people are working from home, like those are like permanently staying in the city, but these people, so that's first, because they're involved in daily work like transport sector, day labor work, work in the construction industry. They basically they don't have any job available, so they actually had to come back to local areas because they lost their livelihoods. So, okay, while returning to the to areas, they do engage in short-term occupation like where available artwork or daily laborer, but they are not adequate. But that's the time people are trying to use their savings to survive. But then in May 2020, cyclone Amphan hit coastal region of Bangladesh, and that cyclone Amphan induced waterlogging lasted for about 8 months. So that's actually was very difficult. It's like another burden for the local people because they lost their house. There's almost no short-term occupation available due to waterlogging in this area. Some of them, even they are working in the shrimp farms because of the riverbank erosion and embankment failure. So they lose their job. So that actually led to high food shortages in this region. So during, like after COVID and mostly like there is some food and relief operation following the cyclone by international and government organization, but they're also for limited times. So that lets actually, so people, when they don't have money and any livelihood option choice, they again started to migrate from October 2020. So because they need to support their livelihoods and refill their food shortages. Also, migration increased in larger scale and for a longer period. So this disaster and pandemic also impact on our existing disaster management plan, as government need to prioritize other strategies to combat the pandemic risk. So therefore, there's limited resource and capacity to support the disaster management plan and local adaptation practices. So looking at the post-COVID, so we can see that the length of stay has increased from, like previously it was maximum of 24 weeks, that increased to 28 weeks, especially in the brick fields. And also paddy sowing and paddy harvesting both increased from 3 to 6 weeks to 8 to 10 weeks. And in this time, actually, people are migrating to different, because previously people are like, because of the network, they used to go to, for example, in northeastern region, but now they're actually going to multiple regions, like because of the different crop pattern and the timing of the crop sowing and harvesting. So they're traveling to multiple areas, not only limited to one specific region. So I've also identified that in the study that previously people are not very much engaged in deep sea fishing in the Bay of Bengal, but because it's a very high risk job, like people often, because they use very small boat to go for deep sea fishing, and the risk of cyclones, tidal surges and all these things. Also the pirates sit there. So all this but people, because they have no other, some people, they only know, for example, agriculture or fishing. So they're just like going there. We have also identified that a group of people also going to India as well, in Gujarat areas. So for paddy sowing. So that's the new findings as well. Like previously, we haven't find such findings. Previously, only people used to go India mainly for brickfield work in Calcutta and New Delhi. Also, like common migration pattern, like for example, people going for any time of the year, especially during the rainy season, like June, July, August. Sometimes even people have like work there, like they have land for shrimp farm, small land, but still they don't sit in the area. So they mostly try to go to earn some extra cash to work in the city. So this has also, previously people used to go 1 week to 12 weeks for like short-term migration, but now no one is going for like 1 week, because this minimum is now 2 months, like 8 weeks. Yeah, the reason is that because this migration involves high transaction cost, and because of the COVID-19 and pandemic lockdown, they have spent all their savings. So now to avoid those transaction costs, so they are going to for the longer period. So I also would like to mention that, so most of the seasonal migration is happening. So like 1 or 2 family member, normally like the man or the like elder son, they used to go to the city or regional places for migration. The rest of the family remain in that, because like housing cost is mainly very expensive and also this cause high transaction. Therefore, migration is happening limited to within 1 or 2 family members. So, okay. So looking at conclusion, it's I think it's very quick. So our key findings was that people are actually shifted from the land, mainly by shrimp industries, and lose their base of self-sustaining agriculture that existed before 1980s. So there has been significant change in last 40 years, and as well as climate change, natural disaster, and pandemics exacerbating the already existing problem. Yes, climate change and sea level rise is a scenario, but it's people are mainly migrating for economic reasons, and because because of the environmental degradation, and where they're considering seasonal migration as a livelihood adaptation strategy due to failure of local resilience and ecological disaster. So the study findings is that COVID has actually intensified the already vulnerable situation and leading to widespread migration. So in this study, we suggested an integrated transformational mechanism that brings back people to the self-sustaining agricultural system that's focused on sustainable stream farming, strengthen livelihood diversification, and creation of job opportunities locally so that it reduces the flow of migration to the city centers and regional areas, and people can work in the locally. So I think this is the last slide. So because looking at the governance of migration has not been effectively mainstreamed in the current policy regime in Bangladesh, there are a couple of reasons because migration was considered as a threat, because especially a lot of research have been done that they're focusing on larger scale migration to the capital. So government policy is considered migration as a threat. There is a lack of political will. There is a limited capacity to and financial capacity to extend livelihood diversification initiative or infrastructure development in the coastal region of Bangladesh. There is a huge informal migration because all the seasonal migration, they migrate through informal channels. Therefore, government has no data and there's no record. Therefore, it's hard to govern and manage and really difficult to regulate informal seasonal migration. And also there has been limited consultation with international organization and local people while formulating the policy. So in this study, we're trying to look at the existing resilience building strategy that leads to diversification on seasonal migration, and where what new transformation strategies can be incorporated in the existing regional framework that can strengthen the livelihood support mechanism. And government also just needs some scope of rice farming. This is that can attract more people not to choose migration rather than working in the rice farming. And because currently also stream farming, because of salinity intrusion, stream culture is not very much profitable nowadays because of a lot of disease and viruses that's affecting the production and outcomes, because they're repeatedly using the same land. There's no because continuous use of same lands. So we suggested introduction of sustainable stream farming, as well as actually we're looking at some of the regional areas, especially alongside the river. There is some development going on for industrial development, and then our next study will look at the how we can create more job opportunities in those in this region and attract more people to work in this occupation. Therefore, reduce the migration flow from coastal region of Bangladesh. I think that's all.